The night we buried my husband, my own son hit me, and then told me to disappear. I can still feel the cold shine of the chapel lights on my skin, like I was standing under a spotlight I never asked for. Harold's casket was only a few steps away, surrounded by drooping flowers and relatives who kept whispering the same tired comforts. I had been a wife for 42 years, and suddenly I was the widow, like that one word explained everything. Caleb's face was tight, pinched in a way I didn't recognize. His wife, Tessa, stood behind him with her arms folded, lips pressed into a straight line that looked almost practiced. I had seen that line before, at Thanksgiving when I asked a simple question, at Christmas when I suggested we leave one ornament exactly where Harold liked it. "Pack your things," Caleb said, voice low. "You're not staying here anymore." I blinked at him. My ears rang from exhaustion, from grief, from the hours of greeting people who didn't really know Harold but wanted to be seen grieving anyway. "Caleb," I whispered, "not tonight." He stepped closer. "Tonight," he hissed, and the word had teeth. I looked past him at the casket, as if Harold might sit up and tell our boy to stop. But Harold stayed still, and the room kept breathing around us. Then Caleb's hand moved. Fast. Hard. It cracked against my cheekbone, and my head turned with it. For a second, I tasted metal, like I'd bitten down on a coin. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at him, stunned by the simple fact that a child I once rocked to sleep could lift his arm like that. What does a mother do when her own blood decides she is disposable? Tessa's eyes flicked to my face, not with concern, but with calculation, like she was taking measurements for a new set of curtains. "Out," Caleb said again, quieter now, as if the slap had settled something inside him. "This house is ours." My tongue felt thick. "It's the home your father built," I managed. "And I built it too." Caleb leaned in. "Not anymore." He said it like a verdict. My suitcase was still by the hallway, half full from the hospital week. I didn't have to search. I didn't have to ask permission. I just reached for the handle and pulled. The wheel sounded too loud on the hardwood Harold installed one summer when we couldn't afford a contractor, only stubbornness. No one stopped me. That was the part that bruised deeper than my cheek. Not one aunt, not one cousin, not one good church friend stepped in. They watched me roll my life toward the door like it was a piece of furniture being returned. Outside, the air was sharp and damp. Late fall in the Upper Peninsula has a way of biting through a coat like it's nothing. I stood on the porch and looked back at the windows. Light spilled out warm and yellow, and it looked like a painting of a family I no longer belonged to. I walked to the corner gas station because my hands were shaking too badly to drive. I sat on the bench by the ice machine, breathing in the smell of diesel and stale coffee. A young clerk I recognized, Evan, the boy who used to bag my groceries, opened the door and asked, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I touched my cheek and felt the swelling rising like bread dough. "I'm all right," I lied, because older women learn to lie politely. "Just waiting on a ride." He didn't push. He only held the door so I could step into the warmth. And in that small kindness, something inside me steadied. Because kindness from strangers can remind you how cruel your own house has become. That night, I slept in a roadside motel that smelled like bleach and old carpet. The heater clicked like it was annoyed to be working. I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, listening to a family argue through the wall about a television remote. I replayed Caleb's words until they turned into a dull chant. Not the house part, the ours part. The way he said it, like I had been a temporary visitor in the very rooms where I'd served soup, stitched Halloween costumes, and waited up for him when he got his first driver's license. In the dark, I reached into my purse and felt the edge of a small key on my keyring. A bank key. A safe deposit key. The thing Harold told me to keep separate from the house keys. He said it during his last good week, when he could still hold a cup without spilling. He'd called me to the bedside and slid an envelope into my hand. "Don't show Caleb," he whispered. "Not unless he turns mean." At the time, I'd scolded him softly. "He's our son," I told Harold. He'd never. Harold's eyes had been tired but clear. Sweetheart, he said, love doesn't erase human nature. It just makes us pretend longer. In that motel room, I understood what he meant. And I understood something else too, something Caleb and Tessa did not know yet. At 8 the next morning, I walked into the bank with a scarf hiding my cheek and my spine held straight out of pure will. The lobby smelled like printer toner and lemon cleaner. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with cheap plastic ornaments that caught the light and tried to look cheerful. A woman at the counter smiled. How can we help you today? My name is Marjorie Lang, I said. I need to change the payment authorization on the mortgage for 114 Alder Lane. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. Are you the account holder? I'm listed, I answered. On everything that matters. She asked for my ID. I handed it over. She looked from the card to my face, and her eyes softened at the swelling. I waited for pity. I didn't want it. I wanted process. After a few minutes, she nodded. You're a co-borrower, she said carefully. You can stop the automatic draft. I exhaled like I'd been holding air for years. Do it, I said. I signed my name once. One signature. That was all it took to pull the financial floor out from under the people who thought they'd shoved me off it. Was I proud of what I was about to do? No. Was I ashamed? Also no. I was done being treated like the family's background noise. She slid papers across to me. This will put the loan into delinquency if no one pays, she warned gently. I met her gaze. Then the people living in that house should learn how bills work. On my way out, I didn't go back to the motel. I drove to the branch across town where the vault was. My hands didn't shake anymore. Grief still sat in my chest, but something else had climbed on top of it, resolve, heavy and quiet. In the private room, I opened box 309 and pulled out what Harold left me, a notarized addendum to his will, the deed history, and a folder of mortgage statements going back decades, each one with my name beside his. I also pulled out a small recorder. A plain black device I started carrying after Harold's first hospital stay, because doctors talk fast and life changes faster. That recorder had been in my coat pocket during the funeral night. It wasn't meant to capture a crime. It was meant to capture reminders. But it caught Caleb's voice. It caught his cruelty. It caught the sound of my own silence afterward. I sat there a long time. The vault room was quiet in a way that felt sacred. And I realized Harold hadn't left me revenge. He left me a door. Why would a good man plan for the worst? Because he knew our son, and he knew me. He knew I'd excuse anything until it broke me. I went back to the motel, opened my old laptop, and uploaded scans of the documents. My fingers moved like they belonged to someone else, someone organized, someone unafraid. Then I wrote an email to Harold's attorney, Denise Parker, the woman who'd helped us rewrite our estate plans after his diagnosis. Subject line, need help. Urgent. I attached everything. The will addendum. The mortgage proofs. The audio file. And a short sentence that tasted like iron. Caleb struck me and forced me out. Denise called within 10 minutes. Marjorie, she said, voice level, are you safe? Safe enough, I answered. Not whole, but safe. She didn't ask me why my son did it, because she already understood what families can become when money is involved. Instead, she said, Harold's addendum has a condition. If Caleb harms you or tries to remove you from the home, his inheritance rights collapse. My throat tightened. So it's real, I whispered. It's real, Denise confirmed. And the recording matters. The bank paperwork matters. Your name on the deed matters. I stared at the motel curtains, stained by time, and felt something unexpected, relief. Not because my son was about to suffer, but because I wasn't crazy for believing I'd been erased. The law could see me even when my family refused. Denise continued, I can file today. But I need you to decide, do you want to enforce it? I thought of Caleb's hand across my face. I thought of Tessa's smirk. I thought of Harold in that hospital bed, begging me not to dismiss warning signs as stress. Yes, I said. My voice didn't wobble. File it. That evening, I drove to a small rental apartment Denise's office helped me find, month to month, plain, clean, nothing fancy. I brought only what I had in my suitcase. No photo albums. No quilts. I left my memories behind because I couldn't carry them and still breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the quiet. Not the lonely quiet. The kind that lets you hear your own thoughts again. And one thought kept tapping at me, Caleb thinks I'm helpless. The next week proved how wrong he was. Denise filed the notice with the probate court. She sent formal letters. She requested a freeze on the estate distribution. She warned Caleb that any attempt to sell or refinance would be contested. I didn't call him. I didn't send a dramatic text. I didn't post online. I moved like winter, slow, inevitable, and impossible to argue with. Sometimes survival looks like paperwork. A few days later, the first picture showed up on my neighbor's phone. Look, she said awkwardly, holding the screen out like it might burn her. Tessa posted this. There was my living room, my worn sofa, replaced. Harold's chair, gone. The lamp I bought with my first overtime check, replaced by something white and shiny. The caption talked about new beginnings and finally making it ours. I stared at the photo until my eyes went dry. That room wasn't just a room. It was where Harold taught Caleb to shuffle cards. It was where I wrapped Christmas gifts at midnight. It was where I sat alone after my mother died, holding grief like a bowl that never emptied. And now Tessa was decorating it like she'd invented it. I handed the phone back. Thank you, I said softly. I needed to see how comfortable they are. My neighbor frowned. Marjorie, what are you going to do? I didn't answer, because the answer was already moving through the system like a letter on its way. 31 days after I stopped the automatic draft, the bank mailed a default notice to 114 Alder Lane. A formal letter with stiff language and deadlines. The kind of letter that makes confident people suddenly sweat. I wasn't there to see Caleb open it, but I could picture his hands. He's always had expressive hands. As a toddler, he waved them like flags. As a teenager, he slammed doors with them. As a man, he used them to strike his mother. That evening, my phone rang. Caleb's name lit up the screen like an old warning sign. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Hello. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Mom? I didn't fill the silence for him. I used to do that, rush in with softness, cover his discomfort like a blanket. Not this time. We got a letter, he blurted. About the mortgage. About foreclosure. What is happening? I looked out my apartment window at a parking lot light buzzing like an insect. What do you think is happening? I asked. He swallowed hard. Did you stop the payments? Yes, I said. One clean syllable. But why would you do that? His voice rose. We're going to lose the house. I waited a beat. You told me it wasn't my home, I replied. So I'm treating it like it isn't. There it was, the pause where he tried to rearrange reality in his head to make himself the victim again. Mom, please, he said, and I heard tears trying to climb out of him. We were upset. It was after Dad's service. We didn't mean. Did your hand mean it? I asked quietly. He went silent. And in that silence, I heard the truth. He had no excuse sturdy enough to stand on. Tell the bank it was an error, he begged. Just restart it. We can talk. Tessa can apologize. We can figure it out. I could have argued. I could have lectured. But grief has taught me that words are expensive, and I was done overspending. No, I said. You'll speak to my attorney. Then I ended the call. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I blocked his number. My heart pounded, but my mind stayed steady. What kind of mother blocks her child? The kind who finally understands that love without boundaries is just slow self-destruction. 2 days later, Denise arranged a family meeting at my sister-in-law's house. Neutral territory, they called it. There were cookies on a plate and coffee in a pot, like everyone wanted to pretend we were discussing holiday plans instead of betrayal. I arrived last on purpose. I wanted them to sit with their anxiety a while. I wanted them to feel, just for a few minutes, what I'd felt walking out of my own front door. Caleb sat at the table, shoulders hunched. Tessa wore a blazer too bright for the season, like she was trying to outshine the situation. When I walked in, the room stopped breathing. I didn't hug anyone. I didn't apologize for being late. I set my tote bag on the table and took a seat across from my son. Denise stood. She didn't smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice professional as winter. "I represent Marjorie Lang, surviving spouse of Harold Lang." Tessa's chin lifted. "We already know the will," she said quickly. "Everything goes to Caleb." That's what Harold wanted. Denise tilted her head slightly. "There is an addendum," she said. "Signed and notarized." Caleb blinked. "Addendum?" Denise slid the document forward, but she didn't let them touch it yet. "It contains a condition," she explained. "If Caleb harms Marjorie or attempts to force her from the marital home, his inheritance rights under the estate are revoked." A cousin inhaled sharply. My sister-in-law's hand flew to her mouth. The room shifted, like a floorboard finally breaking under too much weight. Caleb's voice cracked. "That's not." "Mom, tell them that's not." Denise raised one finger. "We also have evidence supporting the condition being triggered." She placed a small speaker on the table and pressed play. The room filled with sound, Caleb's voice, harsh and unmistakable, ordering me out. Then the sharp smack of impact. Then my breathing, thin and shocked. No one moved. Even Tessa's confident posture collapsed into something rigid and frightened. Denise stopped the recording. "The court has been notified," she said. "The estate distribution is frozen pending review. Additionally, Marjorie has legal standing on the mortgage and has revoked auto-draft authorization." Caleb's face drained. "Mom," he whispered, and the words sounded like a child's again. "I didn't know." "What didn't you know?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "That I mattered? That paperwork exists? That actions cost something?" Tessa finally spoke, sharp as broken glass. "This is extreme. Families fight. People say things. You're blowing this up." I turned toward her slowly. "You redecorated my grief," I said. "You treated my marriage like a hand-me-down. And you watched my son raise his hand at me." She opened her mouth, then shut it. For once, her rehearsed confidence had nothing to stand on. Caleb's eyes filled. "I'm sorry," he said. "I swear I'm sorry." I nodded once, because I heard him. But hearing is not the same as handing someone their power back. Denise looked at me. "Marjorie," she said, "you can choose to negotiate, or you can enforce the addendum fully." I looked around the table at everyone who had watched me leave that funeral home. All those faces that loved Harold, supposedly, yet couldn't spare me an ounce of protection. "I'm enforcing it," I said. Caleb made a sound like he'd been punched. "Mom." I held up my palm. "You made your decision in front of your father's casket," I told him. "Now I'm making mine while I'm still alive." 3 nights later, someone knocked on my apartment door. Soft knocks, hesitant, like the person outside was afraid of what they'd find. I already knew who it was. I opened the door. Caleb stood there without a coat, hair damp from rain. Tessa hovered behind him, clutching her purse like a shield. Caleb's eyes were red. "Mom," he said, and his voice folded, Please. We can't fix this without you. I didn't invite them in. I stayed in the doorway, one hand on the frame, like a line drawn in ink. He swallowed. The bank won't talk to me, he admitted. They said I'm not authorized. Denise sent letters. They froze things. The house is facing consequences, I finished for him. He dropped to his knees right there in the hall, like humility had finally found him. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I was cruel. I was wrong. Tessa's eyes flashed. We made a mistake, she said quickly. You could reverse this. Just call and reinstate. We'll take over payments. You don't even have to move back. I studied them both. Here was the truth, plain as daylight. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. So I reached into my purse and pulled out a document sleeve. I handed it down to Caleb. He took it with shaking hands. He scanned the page, confused. What is this? It's the transfer agreement, I said. The house is no longer in our family. Tessa's breath caught. You sold it? I placed it, I corrected. To a nonprofit that houses displaced older women. They offered a fair price and a fast close. Caleb's mouth hung open. But, that was our future, he whispered. I shook my head. It was your father's life, I said. And mine. You were a guest who confused access with ownership. A door you didn't build isn't yours to slam. Caleb's shoulders shook. Where will you go? He asked, and for the first time in weeks, the question sounded like concern instead of strategy. I already went, I told him. I'm not homeless. I'm not lost. I'm just not available to be hurt again. Tessa's voice rose. This is punishment. I kept my tone low. No, I said. This is protection. Caleb looked up at me, rain on his lashes. Do you forgive me? He asked. That question is a trap when you're a mother, because you want to say yes so quickly it can choke you. But I had learned something. Forgiveness and restoration are not the same thing. I forgive you, I said. But I won't repair what you broke with your own hands. He nodded, as if each word weighed a pound. Tessa stared at the carpet. I stepped back into my apartment. Before I closed the door, I said one last thing. I loved you long before you deserved it, I told Caleb. Now you have to learn how to live with that. Then I shut the door and turned the lock. Not out of spite, out of peace. A month later, I moved into a small cabin near a gray-blue lake, the kind of place where the trees look like they've seen generations come and go without comment. The cabin isn't fancy. The porch creaks. The stove takes patience. But the air feels honest. The first morning, I stood outside with coffee and watched mist lift off the water in slow ribbons. No arguing voices. No tense dinners. No eye rolls when I spoke. Just the quiet sound of my own life returning. Do you know what it's like to sleep without bracing for the next insult? It's like taking off shoes that were too tight for years and realizing your feet still work. I unpacked only what mattered: Harold's photo, my worn recipe box, a quilt I finally went back for with Denise's help, and that little recorder. I kept it not to torture myself, but to remember that I wasn't imagining any of it. One evening, the wind rattled the windows and I sat at a small table with my laptop open. I started typing stories, real ones, the kind older women carry in their bones. The hydrangeas Harold planted. The year the roof leaked and we patched it ourselves. The day Caleb was born and Harold cried so hard the nurse handed him tissues like he was a child too. I didn't write to ruin anyone. I wrote to stitch myself back together. And then, because I am tired of silence doing all the talking, I recorded my voice reading those pages out loud. I sent the first file to my editor friend's grandson, who knew how to upload things to the internet without making me feel foolish. When I saw my story posted under the channel name Dust of Old Days, I sat back and laughed, one short laugh that surprised me, because it sounded like the woman I used to be. The messages began slowly. One woman wrote, "I thought I was the only one." Another said, "I'm 60 and my kids treat me like a burden." A man wrote, "I never realized what my mother swallowed to keep peace." Suddenly, my pain wasn't just pain. It was a lantern. I still think about Caleb sometimes. I wonder if he drives past 114 Alder Lane and feels the sting of what he threw away. I wonder if he remembers Harold's hands, calloused, steady, building that front step. But I don't let those thoughts move in with me. I let them pass like weather. Because my home now isn't a structure someone can claim. My home is the place inside me that finally learned to say, no more. If you're listening and you've ever been treated like you're easy to discard, hear me, your years count. Your labor counts. Your love counts. And if someone benefits from your softness while offering you none in return, you are allowed to change. You are allowed to get your name back. If this story gave you language for something you've lived through, please like this video and follow Dust of Old Days so more forgotten voices find their way home. And if you're still in the middle of your own storm, I'll leave you with the truest thing I've learned: peace isn't something your family gives you. Peace is something you choose, and then defend.